So, hello everyone. Thanks for attending this webinar. My name is Daniela and I'm marketing manager at Xenit. Today I'm here with two special guests, our CEO Ronnie Timmermans and our chief architect Tom Skens, to talk about Alfred Edge. So let's start. And then basically in this hour, we will walk through a really brief introduction about Xenit, and then Ronnie, we will show you all challenges and the benefit that we basically are solving with Alfred Edge. And then we have half an hour time with Toon that we show main feature about the product. And then we will share with you some customer stories. And of course, we will have a Q&A session. And you can start to type your question if you have in the chat, and we will reply at the end of this session. So I think we can start with Ronnie.
Okay, thank you, Daniela. So, well, glad you're all here. Quickly on Xenit, we have been 11 years partner with Alfresco, founded in 2007, 10 plus years of experience, more or less 25 people on board. We have our Alfred products, of which we are proudly presenting today Alfred Edge, and position it as well in the Alfred ecosystem that adds quality of service to Alfresco, and a number of global customers, large insurance companies, etc. We are a certified partner for those 10 years, build solutions with large industrial customers on top of Alfresco, APS, and ACS. The important things that we're doing is we're a system integrator, Alfresco projects, but we also deliver products. We think that there is place for an ecosystem of usability, resilience, high availability, build all those things with and around Alfresco. We have acquired a lot of experience with large-scale installations at PNV, at ETIAS, talk 50 million documents, 80 million documents or more, and even smaller scale installations that require a lot of availability, performance, tuning, etc. So our products help to address those challenges. Thirdly, we also have, of course, consultancy on how to use Alfresco, how to use Alfresco content services, process services, and any part of the Alfresco stack. Getting started, what's Alfred Edge? Maybe a little bit of the background of Edge. Having many years of experience of running Alfresco in an industrial environment with sometimes 10,000s of documents flowing in or more from different systems, learned us that you should use best practices in architecture to make sure that Alfresco operates at its best possible conditions. The solutions and the situations that you have with customers is, of course, you have a number of systems, third-party backend systems that interface to Alfresco. We give here an example of a typical insurance company. So we're referring a lot to insurance companies because our large-scale accounts are in the insurance sector. You could have a solution for your live business, a solution for your non-live business, for your claims. They're all third-party applications. And out of the insurance sphere, you can think about ERPs like SAP and those solutions. All of these solutions actually consume and produce documents. And they do that to maybe one Alfresco instance, maybe more, because you could have a systems of record implemented with Alfresco. You can have an operational system implemented with Alfresco. You can have Alfresco process services. All those systems interact with those base components. And as you can see, very quickly, you get a lot of connections. They go all the way, and it's very hard to keep track of what system is communicating with what kind of component of Alfresco. So that needs a solution, which brings us to Alfred Edge. It decouples your content services architecture as a single point to Alfresco. What does that mean? That means that you will offer a stable interface. In architectural terms, it's a facade. It's a facade to the underlying systems, so you can optimize and make more uniform all the different accesses to Alfresco. The scheme on the right, I think, nicely states and depicts what is a simplification. You want to have a single point of access to Alfresco that exposes a versioned API to your outside world. While you create stability to the outside world, you allow Alfresco and Alfresco process services, content services, all those underlying components to evolve and not disturb and not have integration and regression problems with the systems on top. I think this is part of the lessons learned that we try to put into products with large-scale industrial environments. You don't even have to have 50 million documents to have this problem. You can have it with 500,000 or 1 million. Whenever you start to interface more systems to your Alfresco, you want to have that decoupling to create stability. Yeah, if we then go to the next slide, the problem actually is even more complicated than many systems interacting with underlying process and content service systems. There is the problem of common concerns like authentication, security, logging, performance tracing, resilience features. Some of those Toon will demonstrate in the demo part. Those are all common concerns. They're common, so they can be handled once in one layer. And there you apply best cloud principles to handle those concerns in the layer of Alfred Edge. So we try to take away your problems, your configurations, your troubleshooting issues in terms of authentication, security, logging, performance tracing, resilience, even more, but we can only handle so many in this webinar. By putting those features, qualities into the Alfred Edge layer, so it's handled once, and it's handled once for all systems that integrate with Alfresco. Of course, then you will create a single sign-on gateway to all the interfacing systems. You will add security because once you're in Edge, you start to communicate with Alfresco or with APS with JWT. You have one layer in which all access is locked. Toon will show that as well. So you have complete visibility on what's happening. You can have performance tracing here, and you don't have to implement that neither in all your underlying Alfresco systems nor in the top level systems. It's handled by this layer. Of course, a few components run on Alfresco as well to offer all that functionality, but basically you isolate it in a layer on top of Alfresco. Resilience will be shown as well because Edge can even act as a load balancer, and that will be part of the demo. This is the high-level overview of the architecture, very high level, so it makes a few compromises in terms of being exact and precise towards trying to explain in simple terms what it does. On top, it's your systems, it's graphical user interfaces, it's third-party systems, it's any system that automatically creates documents. Those documents pass via an API gateway, which is built on Spring Cloud. Toon will explain that as well. And the gateway can then use underlying modules like an API, a business API, and Inflow, which is a module that comes, that is a modular part of Alfred Edge, which allows asynchronous large volume input in Alfresco while retaining quality of service and not overloading Alfresco. So Edge bundles modules and bundles capabilities to allow the high availability, the performance tuning, common concerns in one layer. Edge together with Alfresco allow you to create a very high available environment, which is easy to diagnose, to debug, to performance tune whenever you would have issues of performance. So that's what the image tries to convey. Maybe a few highlights here. Central authentication, show that. Different protocols supported. Again, Toon will talk more about that with single sign-on. Metadata-based access control. I won't tell too much about that. That will be something for later on, but we have capabilities to implement a form of attribute-based access control, which is also exposed via Edge and which helps to scale and simplify access control. We use it, for instance, to have GDPR filters on top of Alfresco without using the extensive, but also sometimes complex ACL system of Alfresco. So to make it simple to have a GDPR protection. Last feature there is improved visibility. You will also see that in the demo, most things are logged. They're added into visual tools for analytics. Any call is logged with details, so you can do tracing, you can do analysis, you can visualize. You have a very clear view of what is happening to Alfresco, not just what, but also how fast that is happening into Alfresco. That brings us to the more interesting part, the meat on the bone part of the webinar, which is a demo that shows three main capabilities. That is the single sign-on and authentication. Toon will explain those more in detail. Tracing of visibility, what's happening in your Alfresco thanks to Edge, how you can authenticate, and there will be a demo on load balancing and resilience, how Edge can do that in a very, very impressive way. So without further ado, I pass on the word to Toon to talk to you about these features and to demonstrate them to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Toon Geens. Thank you, Ronnie, for first introducing me. I'm Toon Geens. I'm Chief Architect at Xenit, and I'm a product lead for Alfred Edge. So in this first series of webinars, the topic for today's demo, Ronnie already mentioned those, are SSO authentication authorization. The second part, the load balancing and resiliency, and third part of the demo will be tracing visibility with Zipkin and the diagnostic capabilities that we gain with those. Now for the demo, Edge is more of a middleware component and not really user-facing, so the amount of user interface is a bit limited, but we're going to show you the functionalities that Edge provides through a few different scenarios. So for the first part, the authentication authorization, we support a few authentication subsystems like LDAP, Active Directory, Kerberos with single sign-on. We support an in-memory database primarily for testing purposes, and we also support using Alfresco as an user authenticating database, which is mainly intentioned for transitioning from organizations that still maintain their user database in Alfresco and want to transition to, for example, to Active Directory or LDAP, and Edge can facilitate that. We have some in the pipeline for later this year, and next year we're going to support OAuth authentication and with OpenID Connect, but that's going to be for next year. Now, that's for the authentication part. So a user logs in with a username and a password, for example. Additionally, Edge allows us to load additional attributes from, for example, Active Directory. For example, my fictional user, Bob, is a member of the sales department. And using this user attribute information, I can authorize some requests. For example, my user Bob from the sales department has dedicated APS workflows to manage his documents and his work and his work. And the organization, the IT department, doesn't really want to give share to this department because if they start moving documents manually, it could get out of sync with the workflows, and they can do all their work with the workflows. So in Edge, you can say everyone from the sales department can access APS from their workflows, but they're not allowed to access share. Now we have authenticated and authorized this user or a request in Edge, and we pass along this information to the origin service, being Alfresco share APS, which means the user has to log in once in Edge. The administrator has to configure the authentication once in Edge, and it can work for all systems that are sitting behind Edge. So in that way, you get a single sign-on for all your ECM-related services. So I'm going to take over the screen now and jump to the real demo. Okay, so I've got this. I'm logging in. This is the login screen for Edge, and I'm just going to log in here in my demo environment. I've prepared the demo environment, and how can I move this? Yeah, sorry. I've prepared the demo environment where I've set up Alfresco in a cluster setup. So I've set up 2 Alfresco nodes in a cluster, and I've prepared a little dashboard here. These 2 Alfrescos have a Postgres database, both connect to the Postgres database, and there is 1 Solr instance for search. And we have Edge in front for the load balancing. Now, what you see here is a simple dashboard just for this demo. And what it shows here is this number is the ID for the Alfresco node in the cluster. So if I refresh a few times, you can see the number changes, which means Edge is redirecting me to Alfresco node 1, Alfresco node 2. And we can see that both Alfresco instances are healthy, which is a good thing. We already seen Edge is an authenticating proxy in front of your services. And the second part, the second functionality is Edge acts as a load balancer for example, for your Alfresco cluster. It can be for other services as well, for APS, for example. So in this demo, we look at an Alfresco cluster with 2 nodes, and Edge has 2 ways to monitor the health of the upstream services of Alfresco and the request. There is an active health check to see if the Alfresco is still healthy, and secondary, there is a passive request timeout check. So if queries to one of the Alfresco nodes would start timing out, they will be removed from the load balancer. If the health check starts failing, they will be automatically removed from the load balancer. So if one Alfresco is still limping along, and the service we actually provide to the end user is a bit mixed, because one Alfresco node is about to crash, Edge can automatically detect and fix this. So to show you how this works, I'm going to wipe out my terminal here, and I'm going to show you. It's not really important that you can read this screen. It's just doing request to Alfresco, and if it's blue, it's good. So it's doing a request every second, and as long as it's blue, it's good. Now, in my dashboard, so I'm jumping between 2 hosts, between the 9A and the 3F host. I'm going to just deliberately crash one of those Alfresco servers. So if I hit crash here, and I go back to my screen, we can see request starts failing. Not every request. So the blue requests are still going to the healthy Alfresco node, and the red requests are going to the faulty Alfresco node we've just deliberately crashed. Now, this means that Edge picks up on this picks up the requests to this node are failing, and it will automatically remove the failing Alfresco node from the load balancer. So you got like in time window of 5 or 10 seconds, that request did fail. And if we now here go back to the dashboard and keep refreshing, we can see we always end up at a 9A Alfresco instance. Edge actively removed the other Alfresco node which was failing from the load balancer. Now, if we restart the node, we fix the problem, we boot up a new instance in the cluster, Edge can automatically pick up, there's a new Alfresco instance available. As soon as the health check passes, it will be automatically added to the load balancer. So I can try to repair the Alfresco, and in a bit it will come back. I'm not now waiting for this. We're going to the next part of the demo. Now we've done the authentication and the load balancing with the resiliency features. Now the third part of the demo is the tracing, the distributed tracing with Zipkin, and how it can help diagnose problems. So as an example, I'm opening share here. I just plain share, and I'm executing a search query. Now, the search query turns up with a few results, but I think the performance was okay-ish here, but I want to have visibility in which part was actually slow, or which part consumed much time. So to do that, we've instrumented Edge, Share, Alfresco, the database, and Solar, and they send out telemetry data to Zipkin, which is a distributed tracing system, which can allow you to diagnose those problems. So we've just executed this search, and I'm going to open Zipkin. And in Zipkin, I can search for my requests. So I've got this request I did 27 minutes ago, and I can look at this request, and I got a full profile of all the requests that were made. So my browser did a request to Edge with a small overhead. Edge sent a request to Share. Share sent a request to Alfresco. Alfresco did some database calls. Send the query to Solar. I can look into details. So the Solar answered this query in 30 milliseconds, which is actually pretty fast. The performance issue is not there. But then there happens a series of database requests. I'm just going to open one of those, and I can actually see into the SQL query that Alfresco sent to the database. And I can use this to look into problems, see where performance bottlenecks are, see which parts are slow, and see I can improve those. So it's not a tool that to diagnose errors that are happening as the main feature, but it is as a tool that gives insight into how the performance behaves. Debugging why things are slow is a much harder problem than when there are errors. If there are things not working, you can look in the log files, you can find an error, and it's easy to fix. But if things are slow, where should I start looking? Should I start looking at Solar? Should I start looking at the database, the query palm, for example, or is it Alfresco itself with the caches, or is it Share or some other part of your system that is not behaving as it should be? So this provides you with a tool to investigate those issues. Additionally, I'm going here back to the dashboard, and you can see my requests are routed to both Alfresco nodes as well, because the other one, the one we crashed earlier was repaired. Now we're going to introduce a different kind of failure. We're going to send out, we're going to do a request to Alfresco where some error happens. So when I click this button, some exception is thrown. An error happened somewhere in the system. Did it happen in Share? Did it happen in Alfresco or in Solar? I don't know at this point. I should start looking through all the various systems and through the log files to find where the exception is. Now, when I've got the correlation ID, the Zipkin ID, the unique request ID that Edge is generating for every request, I can actually look up this ID in Zipkin, and I can see, oh, the error actually happened in Alfresco. Alfresco had an HTTP 500. So this is a tool where you can pinpoint which system caused the error. And in addition to that, this request ID can also be added to your log files, to your access logs, to your application logs, and which also allows you to faster diagnose problems. So a user comes back with a I don't know, with a screenshot saying, "I'm having a problem. Can you please fix this for me?" I've set here a Elk stack for log management for this demo. So I've copy pasted the trace ID or the request ID I got earlier, and I'm just feeding it in the search bar in Kibana, and I can find all my access logs and my application logs to see the error. So I can just expand this here, and I see, oh, I've got this exception here, the exception for demo purposes because I clicked the button, and it's happened on my second Alfresco instance. This is the request ID is used as a correlation ID, and using this correlation ID, you can diagnose problems. Maybe a problem in one system cause another problem in a secondary system just for one request. Using these tools, you will be fast, and you get tools to faster diagnose problems and be able to resolve issues faster. Additionally, Edge is exposing various metrics like latency times for different routes, for different API calls, for example. You can plot them, for example, you can export them and plot them in Grafana, for example. But that's not part of this demo right now. So this is the end of this demo, and I'm giving the word back to Ronnie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. I guess I'm back on speaker. I'm just going to wrap it up quickly, what you have been seeing. You saw Edge authenticating. That was not the most exciting part. It was mainly invisible, but it authenticated, and you know that we support these modern cloud-based protocols, or let's say fashionable in a cloud era, some or out. Secondly, Ton showed the capabilities of load balancing and resilience. So Edge actually detected the fact that a node failed. It redirected traffic, and it detected that the node came back, and it started load balancing again, and you didn't have to intervene. So in production critical circumstances, you don't want to stress, you don't want to diagnose too much. You want your systems to auto repair, and I think that's a kind of quality that Edge is bringing to the table that we would like to add to, of course, any Alfresco installation in the world, because it needs to be as close as possible to 100% uptime. Thirdly, Tom showed you the tracing and visibility, that Edge is a starting point for any requests into your Alfresco, and logs and traces. If you go to Alfresco, if you go to the database, if you go to Solar, if you go to rendition, whatever that can be instrumented with Zipkin, it can be combined and you have this information together, it shows you where Alfresco is spending time. Not Alfresco, but the whole system that is behind. Alfresco is a number of components. It shows you also how you can diagnose issues with Zipkin IDs, that you can quickly trace, jump into your graphical tools, use your application logs, and pinpoint the problem. It's all about creating operational excellence with your Alfresco, where Edge plays a role. It's not just Edge, there's more. We will be talking about modules that we add like inflow, but Edge is a cornerstone. It's the gateway, it's the portal into your Alfresco installation or installations. So thank you very much for that insight, Toon. Customer stories and key benefits. It's always better when somebody else tells a story about you. So we were very proud that PNV presented at the Alfresco days in Amsterdam, I think beginning of June. They had one of the keynote presentations, and I think they showed the history of what happens if you don't have a facade and an edge-based architecture, and why PNV was a major source of inspiration to us as well to create that product, and is here as well a user of the product. You see the slide with the reference architecture. There is Edge that plays the role of the gateway. It talks to Alfresco via a business API, so that's a high-level API, and it's served and exposed via Edge, and that business API is probably the subject of a next webinar, but you can say a lot about the advantages of creating a business API and not having your third-party systems talk to Alfresco with a lower-level technical API. You can see inflow as well on that picture, because that's the mass ingestion, the batch loading tool into Alfresco. So PNV is happy with this. This is the target architecture, as they call it, the foundation architecture, and it will be deployed over all their Alfrescos. It's a large installation, it's a large customer, it's a very important customer. That's why they have at least 4, even more Alfrescos. We're trying to consolidate that as well, but we are also trying to lift the operational excellence with the Alfred tools, among those Alfred Edge. Going through a few key benefits. It lowers the cost of change. Why? It introduces the separation of Alfresco and other backend systems to your business systems, so you can make them move independently of each other. You've seen the spaghetti of all the systems connecting. You've seen many concerns that could be bundled in Edge. By bundling that, by having a single point of access, by controlling the access to Alfresco, you can just more easily upgrade your Alfrescos without a risk and a fear of all the cross effects, of all the regression problems that typically in those scenarios arise. When you have one system talking to one Alfresco, it's still under your control. The moment you have 2 or 3, it becomes more complicated. That's a lessons learned with Alfresco at PNV, and I think at other sites as well that you know. Enhanced access control model. With Edge and our API, we deliver a module to do attribute-based access control. So an access control filter that uses the metadata of your documents and not the classical access control lists of Alfresco. Actually, it works together very nicely. You can have both. You do a basic check with the Alfresco access control lists, as we do at ETIAS, one of our customers, and then you add some filters which are attribute-based on top of your access control system. The advantage of that is it keeps things very simple. You use Alfresco's ACLs at its strength, you keep it simple, and you add some filters that are role and attribute based on top of that. We'll explain that more in detail later on, not in this webinar. You can save admin and user time. Why? Because automatic repair, availability of systems, it doesn't require your admin your user time as well. Uptime is important, so that's saved. Quality of service, I think, is a very important one. By adding the layer to Alfresco, you can control some things that should not have a negative effect on Alfresco. This layer can actually filter requests, it can throttle requests, it can treat requests from the internet users differently than internal requests. And so we can make sure that you have this quality of service exposed through Edge. You can even control how much resources of Alfresco you can give to certain requests and put them on a higher priority queue than other requests. All that becomes possible with the Alfred architecture, and it's possible with an Alfresco backend in that architecture. Security and compliance, Toon explained the fact that we use JWT to connect from Edge to Alfresco. So even the connections from your gateway, from your portal to Alfresco are secured. It's more secure than having direct access via different protocols towards your Alfresco. It's not only Alfresco, it also secures access to, for instance, Alfresco process services next to Alfresco content services. Operations clarity, last point, that is, you've seen how all of the access has been logged. It's being extracted to visualization and analytics tools. So we can start seeing very clearly who is doing what on your Alfresco. Be mind GDPR and privacy. So that's information that needs to be treated with enough care. But it helps to see where are we using Alfresco, how is Alfresco reacting to higher workloads, who is doing what in the system, and in case of doubt and in case of fraud, you can use that information to detect what kind of patterns of using are there. In times where you have all your systems in your own intranet, within your firewall, very nicely enclosed and no external access, those problems are maybe of a lower significance. But in the digital transformation age, where you're going to open up your systems and your components to your partners, to third parties, to your customers, to citizens, to the audience in general, I think you need enough protection layers in between those users and Alfresco. And again, that's what Edge will be bringing, and certainly some of the features in the roadmap enable that kind of digital transformation. And then again, not the screen back to Toon, but the word back to Toon to talk a little bit about the next webinar, what we want to cover.
Yes, so you already briefly mentioned it. In the next webinar, we will be talking about metadata-based access controls. So for a practical example, in an insurance company, the case officer, the business person responsible for a insurance contract, should not have access to your medical records, to the medical records of this client. Only the medical officer inside this company is actually allowed to see those documents. So while you still want to keep all the documents for this particular contract together, your case officer is not allowed to see this, and we can manage this with metadata. For example, a medical document can have a confidentiality medical, for example, and Edge will determine if a request is coming from a user, if this user is a medical officer, it will add this information to the JSON web token that is sent to Alfresco, and Alfresco will evaluate and see if this user is actually allowed to see this medical document, which is one of the possible use cases for metadata-based access controls. The possibilities are a lot more varied, a lot more possible than the discretionary access controls and the folder-based inheritance access controls you have in Alfresco right now. Another topic for the next webinar is our integration with Alfred Inflow, which is actually a module which allows you to, which provides an asynchronous API to upload content to Alfresco. You can, so at one point, there is a system that generates 500,000 documents, and you want to store those in Alfresco as fast as possible without actually overloading Alfresco, while everything should keep on working. With Alfred Inflow, we can do this in an asynchronous way with back pressure, getting great throughput, but still keeping online to an HTTP API. I think that will be the main topics for the next webinar. Okay?
Sounds great. Yeah, even for not technical people. I mean, I'm really impressed because I can see the value of Alfred Edge. So now it's more your time for our attendees. If you have any question, we are really glad to answer now. You can even take the control of your voice, or you can use the chat to write down a few questions. I think we have one question. Let me check.
That's a thanks. It's not a presentation.
Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation. Right? It's a pleasure. So, and yeah, no question right now. But this. Yeah. Sorry. Is this product commercial only? Is this product commercial only? Would tu or Ronnie?
Yeah, you can pass that question to me. We will release this in a form completely compliant with Alfresco. That is, there is a community edition in LGPL, call it an open core, and there will be a number of qualities and modules that we add, for instance, GDPR privacy protection in the enterprise subscription. So it's LGPL available. And there's an enterprise subscription in which you, of course, get support, some advanced features, exactly like the model in Alfresco works. So that's the formula. And it's certainly interesting to talk about that, to pick up that subject, what kind of objectives you have with that, because we want to enable a community of partners with the product, but we also want to provide professional support with it. For sure, because the target of the thing is to have a very high level service level in enterprises thanks to that tooling. So I hope that is a good enough answer for you now. And if you need more details, feel happy to contact us.
Any other question? I don't see any other question now, so I think so. In the next days, we will send out the recording of the video. We can still get in touch if you need more information. This is a quite technical product, so it's for a really technical audience. Hope we clarify with our demo some of the main features. And keep in touch for the next one when we show the new one. And thank you again for your time and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.